Mr. President, may we recognize our colleague, the distinguished gentleman from Davao, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, to deliver.
All right. For the privilege hour, the Senator from Davao, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I proceed, may I ask my permission from you, Mr. President, to remove my mask?
Yes.
Anyway, Senator Tolentino is 3 meters away from me.
Oh, yes, yes.
He's safe as far as I am concerned.
You are authorized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
At yun na
Mr.
lang kung
President.
sa computer ko maliit.
My esteemed colleagues in this August chamber, good afternoon. I stand before you today to share my heartfelt sentiment on a topic that has been my personal advocacy since I won the Senate seat last May 2019. This is the legislative proposal to restore the death penalty for drug trafficking cases in the country. As a former military officer, law enforcement
without
officer,
including on the
the
margins.
Bureau of Corrections chief, and now as a lawmaker, I cannot and will never be at peace as I continue to witness with so much desolation, sufferings of our countrymen and women in the hands of drug-crazed individuals. President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, who posed for the reinstatement of death penalty since the start of his 2016 presidential campaign, reiterated his call in his State of the Nation address in 2017. President Duterte underscored his request for Congress to act on all pending legislations to reimpose the death penalty on heinous crimes, especially on the trafficking of illegal drugs. He again made his appeal on his fourth SONA last July 2019, and in his penultimate SONA speech last July 27, the President reiterated the swift passage of a law reviving the death penalty by lethal injection for crimes specified under the Comprehensive Drugs Act of 2002. The punishment of death finds its legal anchor in the 1987 Constitution under Article 3, Section 19, Paragraph 1, which expressly provides, excessive fines shall not be imposed, nor cruel, degrading, or inhuman punishment inflicted. Neither shall death penalty be imposed unless for compelling reasons involving heinous crimes. The Congress hereafter provides for it. Any death penalty already imposed shall be reduced to reclusion perpetua. Pursuant to this mandate, Republic Act 7659, otherwise known as an act to impose the death penalty on certain heinous crimes, amending for the purpose the revised penal laws as amended, other special laws, and for other purposes, was approved on December 13, 1993. Under this law, particularly under its second whereas clause, crimes punishable, civilized, and ordered society. Marami po ang nagtatanong gaano kaepektibo ang pagpataw ng parusang kamatayan sa pagsugpo ng kriminalidad sa ating bansa. Napatunayan na ba na ang hatol ng parusang kamatayan ay nagtatanim ng takot sa mga masasamang loob, kung kaya't bababa na ang insidente ng karumaldumal na krimen? Do we necessarily prove through statistics and hard facts that death penalty indeed will deter the commission of heinous crimes in the future? For these questions, it is important to look back and reflect the ruling of the Supreme Court in the case of People versus Echegaray. Article 3, Section 19 of the 1987 Constitution simply states that Congress, for compelling reasons involving heinous crimes, may reimpose the death penalty. Nothing in the said provision imposes a requirement that for a death penalty bill to be valid, a positive manifestation in the form of higher incidence of crime should first be perceived and statistically proven following the suspension of the death penalty. Neither does the said provision require that the death penalty be resorted to as a last recourse when all other criminal reforms have failed to abate criminality in society. It is immaterial and irrelevant that RA number 7659 cites that there is immaterial and irrelevant, that cites that there has been an alarming absurge of such crimes, for the same was never intended by said law to be the yardstick to determine the existence of compelling reasons involving heinous crimes. Fittingly, that's what RA number 7659 states, is that the Congress, in the interest of justice, public order, and rule of law, and the need to rationalize and harmonize the penal sanctions of heinous crimes, finds compelling reasons to impose the death penalty of said crimes. On 24 June 2006, President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo signed into law Republic Act number 9346, entitled An Act Prohibiting the Imposition of Death Penalty in the Philippines. Section 1 of this law states, the imposition of the penalty of death is hereby prohibited. Accordingly, Republic Act number 8177, otherwise known as the Act Designating Death by Lethal Injection, is hereby repealed. Republic Act number 7659, otherwise known as the Death Penalty Law, and all other laws, executive orders, and decrees, insofar as they impose the death penalty, are hereby repealed or amended accordingly. On 20 September 2006, the Philippines signed the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, aiming at the abolition of the death penalty, and ratified it on November 20, 2007. Under Article 1 of this protocol, state parties have agreed that, number 1, no one within the jurisdiction of a state party to the present protocol shall be executed. Number 2, each state party shall take all necessary measures to abolish the death penalty within its jurisdiction. With the death penalty law archived in the annals of our legislative mills, and with the ratification of second optional protocol, the country has witnessed the horrors of increasing trend of crime rates, particularly those that involve drug trafficking. According to a news article published in January 29, 2017, the Philippines saw a decrease in crime rate when the death penalty was imposed for heinous crimes in 1993. Crime rate decreased from 145.7 in 1993 to 98 in 1998. Based on the official data from Philippine National Police, there was a decreasing trend in the number of heinous crimes committed from the time the death penalty was restored in 1993 through RA 7659. Hence, the 17,166 heinous crimes recorded that year, this number drastically went down to 12,636 in 2005, a year before RA 9346, the anti-death penalty law, was enacted. If you can see on the graph, Mr. President, it is a declining trend. PNP statistics shows that from 12,080 heinous crimes committed in 2006, this number of cases horribly increased to 23,099 in 2016. That's the second graph. The trend is very much increasing. Nagpatuloy ang pananalasa ng karahasang dulot ng bawal na gamot sa ating bansa. Marahil sa pag-iisip ng mga gumagamit ng droga, madaling lusutan ang krimen at posibleng bilhin ang hustisya. habang ang buong bansa ay nagtitiis sa mga karumal-dumal na krimen sa ating lipunan, dumarami pa ang mga insidente ng drug trafficking na patuloy na naghahasik ng kasamaan sa ating mamamayan. Idagdag pa natin dito ang aking personal na karanasan sa loob ng Bilibid when I was the Director General of the Bureau of Corrections, wherein ako'y sinabihan ng isang prominent na Chinese drug lord, convicted drug lord, na, "Sir, kung gusto niyo talagang matakot kami na mag-traffic ng drugs sa Pilipinas, ibalik niyo ang death penalty. Kaya namin paborito ang Pilipinas na bahain ng Cebu dahil wala kayong death penalty dito. At kahit na kami mahuli at kami ay makonbikto, pag kami nakakulong dito sa Bilibid, kahit anong effort ninyo dyan na patayin ang signal, ubusin ang aming mga cellphone dito sa loob para wala kaming komunikasyon sa aming drug network sa labas, hindi pa rin yan obra, sir. Dahil hindi ninyo mababawal ang aming visitation rights. Dahil pag kami ay inyong pinigilan sa aming visitation rights, kami pupunta sa human rights. Because that is our basic human rights to be visited by our loved ones. So, ang aming transaksyon sa illegal na droga ay hindi na dumadaan sa signal ng internet o ng cellphone, kundi face-to-face contact na sa aming mga anak, sa aming asawa, sa aming mahal na sa buhay na pupunta dito sa Bilibid. So patuloy pa rin yung kanilang ginagawang drug transaction. And it was really observed that every time a big haul of drugs were confiscated anywhere in the Philippines, it traces back inside the Bilibid. Pupunta pa rin doon, pabalik doon. Ibig sabihin, sabi nga ng mga drug lord doon, pag nandito na kami sa loob ng Bilibid, hindi na kami takot mahuli dahil kami nahuli na. Hindi ka na kami takot na makulong dahil kami nakakulong na. So, define Bilibid as safe haven for the continuance of their drug trade. While the anti-death penalty enforced and with the country's international commitment through the ratification of the second optional protocol, it may be interesting to analyze the corresponding actions taken by our government in the midst of the current law and order situation in the country. Close scrutiny of the events reveals these facts. Congress continued to propose legislative measures reviving the death penalty law. There have been 29 death penalty bills filed in the House of Representatives since the 15th Congress, with one committee report in the 17th Congress until the current Congress. On the other hand, there have been 24 death penalty bills in the Senate since 14th Congress and several committee hearings conducted by the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs during the 14th to the 17th Congress. Last year, our esteemed colleague, Senator Manny Pacquiao, delivered a privileged speech on the revival of the capital punishment. In his said speech, the good gentleman from Sarangani called for the reimposition of the death penalty for heinous crimes, particularly for drug trafficking. This is another positive indication that, at the very least, the need for rational and informed discourse on capital punishment is still alive, waiting to be deliberated on by this body. One therefore begins to ponder on the following questions. Are we in Congress precluded from the post measures on the revival of death penalty in view of our international commitment under the second optional protocol on ICCPR? If the Philippines is a signatory to that second protocol, is it necessarily restrained from passing laws that would restore death penalty? If this is so, how do we reconcile our international obligations to observe this protocol with our duty to abide by the constitutional mandate to provide or reimpose death penalty for compelling reasons involving heinous crimes. If Congress decides to deliberate on the death penalty bills and eventually to pass them into law, is the Philippines compelled to withdraw its signature and ratification from the second optional protocol? As we consider the answers to these questions, the country meanwhile continues to suffer the effects of one of the grievous ills in our society, which is drug trafficking. Drug trafficking is a serious offense. The United Nations Office of Drug and Crime defines drug trafficking as a global illicit trade involving the cultivation, manufacture, distribution, and sale of substances which are subject to drug prohibition laws. Under Section 3, Paragraph R of RA 9165, illegal trafficking is defined as the illegal cultivation, culture, delivery, administration, dispensation, manufacture, sale, trading, transportation, distribution, importation, exportation, and possession of any dangerous drug and or controlled precursor and essential chemical. Recent cases of drug trafficking all over the country have demonstrated the callous conscience of drug offenders. On the morning of March 14, 2020, approximately 330 grams of shabu worth 5.2 million pesos was confiscated in Davao City, resulting to the arrest of 6 individuals. On May 19, 2020, itong lahat, Mr. President, ay mga pangyayari during the pandemic. 11 Chinese nationals and 1 Filipina were arrested in separate buy-bust operations in Manila and Parañaque. The total amount of suspected shabu seized was 41 grams with a street value of 278,000. May 22, 2020, the PNP and CRPO operatives and the PNP Drug Enforcement Group neutralized 2 drug suspects, recovering 81.6 million worth of illegal drugs. This was in Taguig City. In Bohol, 5 individuals were arrested last May 25, 2020, and 40 million worth of suspected shabu was confiscated in separate buy-bust operations conducted by the Bohol PDEA. The Philippine National Police raided a house in Marilao, Bulacan last June 4, 2020. This police operation yielded 756 kilograms of suspected shabu with an estimated value of 5.14 billion pesos from a Chinese national identified as Yuan Kai and 2 local constituents. The anti-narcotics operatives of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency arise Sultan operation were worth of were it not for the highly sensitive intelligence work of our PNP and the PDEA and their close enforcement, these voluminous drugs would have found drug crazed in many of whom have derived an enormous amount of money by trading these illegal substances. And as the vicious cycle of drug buyers of these illegal drugs continue to plague the society by acts committed under the influence of prohibited drugs. Ito po ang paulit-ulit na malungkot tungkol sa naidudulot ng droga sa ating mamamayan. Walang kahit sa taong amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and in the middle of untold sufferings of our countrymen and women, insensitive drug traffickers have continued their illegal trade among drug dealers and their salivating patrons. Isa lang habang lisan ng community quarantine. Sinamantala ito ng mga drug traffickers sa pagpasok ng na droga. Magaling ang ating PNP at PDEA at nahuli ang mga ito. Mr. Presentation is aware of the country's obligations to fulfill its commitments to international treaties, conventions, and other agreements, including protocols. However, this representation seeks the kind indulgence of this august chamber to, at the very least, deliberate on the issue of death penalty in the country. Can we not objectively study the present crime scenarios, particularly those involving drug trafficking, its evil effects on our society and people? Is it not our corresponding constitutional duty as lawmakers to protect our people from the snares of criminality? Granted, there will be those who will say that the death penalty has not been proven to be a deterrent to the commission of heinous crimes and drug trafficking. But in response, I say, let us not close our doors to the possibility of discussion. Let us enrich statistical data with reasoned discourse in the proper fora. For the victims of heinous crimes and drug abuse are surely more than sapat, Ginoong Pangulo, ang milyon-milyong halaga ng droga na umiikot sa bawat sulok ng ating bansa? Hindi pa ba sapat ang maraming buhay na nakitil at kinabukasan na naglaho dahil sa patuloy na pagdami ng droga sa ating lipunan? The enjoyment of the right to life as envisioned in the second optional protocol and enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is indeed important. But have we not considered that this right may only be fully exercised if and when the people are safe from all forms of dangers, including the evils of drugs? I lay down this concern before this body with a fervent hope that all of us will heed the call of duty to put an end to the malady of drug trafficking vis-a-vis the death penalty. Let us begin the discussion on this important issue. Let us hear both sides of the arguments, whether for or against the reimposition of capital punishment in cases involving drug trafficking. Let our minds and hearts speak so that in the end, we may rest in the knowledge that we have armored our people with sufficient shield against the abysmal effects of drug trafficking in the country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, there are several persons who want to, Mr. President, there are several persons who want to
Yes.
manifest and interpolate. Senator Pangilinan, Mr. President, would like to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Pangilinan is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much. Thank you, Majority Leader. Mr. President, I share a number of points raised by Senator Drilon, our Minority Leader, that the pressing issues of whether you're for or against death penalty and the debates, we should focus or bring that matter to the committee. But there are one particular issue that I'd like to raise. And if the good sponsor, good senator, Senator Drilon, who delivered this privileged speech, I'm sorry, Senator Dela Rosa, if he's willing to yield to a few questions.
Yes, Mr. President.
All right.
Thank you.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ang tanong natin kay Senator Dela Rosa, at salamat sa kanyang privileged speech at ipinaabot sa atin ang concern tungkol dito sa death penalty. Naniniwala ba si Senator Dela Rosa na ang na hinaharap natin ngayon ay ang isa sa pinakamatindi o pinakamatinding health crisis sa ating bansa mula pa nung World War II at economic crisis kung saan ay milyon-milyon nating mga kababayan ay wala ng trabaho?
Naniwala po ako, Mr. President.
Yes. Tama po ba na halos 10 milyon nating mga kababayan base sa mga datos ng Department of Labor ang walang trabaho at Ang expectation nila ay 1,000,000 mga kababayan natin galing sa abroad ay uuwi dahil wala na rin trabaho. Tama po ba yun?
Tama po, Mr. President.
Oo. At naniniwala ho ba ang ating butihing senador na hanggat hindi natin nasusolusyonan at mabawasan itong pagkalat ng COVID, hindi natin mababangon ang ating ekonomiya at mananatiling laganap ang gutom at laganap din ang kahirapan at
Tama po,
kawalan ng trabaho.
Mr. President.
Maaari bang ipaliwanag ni Senator Dela Rosa kung paano makakatulong ang reimposition ng death penalty sa pinakamatinding problema ng kawalan ng hanap buhay at trabaho at pinakamatinding problema ng pagkalat ng COVID sa ngayon?
Well, Mr. President, tayo nga, totoo, tayo may kinakaharap ngayon na pandemic ng COVID-19. But, alam mo, itong aking issue na nire-raise ngayon, this is also considered as a global pandemic, itong drug problem. So, hindi naman siguro ibig sabihin na porke tayo may kinakaharap na global pandemic na COVID-19, ihinto na lang tayo sa paggawa ng ibang batas para sa ibang mga issues na kinakaharap ng ating lipunan at doon na lang tayo mag-concentrate. In fact, Mr. President, your proposition, we had just voted yesterday after the third reading yung ating bayanihan 2. Kung gusto mo talaga na matulungan yung ating mga kababayan para makabangon dito sa pandemyang ating kinakaharap, sana tayo lahat ay bumuto doon sa bayanihan 2 na yun. Dahil yun talaga ang purpose ng bayanihan 2 na yun, para makabangon ang ekonomiya ng Pilipinas. Sana tayo lahat ay bumuto para doon sa batas na yun. Yun lang po, Mr. President, ang aking sagot.
Yes, piniliwanag naman natin kahapon kung bakit ang dahilan ng ating pagboto, ang naging dahilan ng boto natin kahapon. So palagay ko on record na yun. So naniniwala ang butihing senador na sa gitna ng pandemya at milyon-milyon ang walang trabaho at ginugutom, na dapat pa rin top priority ng administrasyon na ibalik ang death penalty. Tama po yun.
Mr. President, when you say about prioritization, well, ibang gago na sasagot na mas priority natin itong death penalty kumpara dyan sa COVID-19. Number 1 priority pa rin natin ang COVID-19. But Mr. President, with all due respect, itong ating Senado naman ay pwede mag-multitasking. Hindi naman ibig sabihin na stop tayo sa ibang gagawin. Focus tayo sa COVID-19. Yun na nga, gumawa na natin ng batas. Bayanihan 1, bayanihan 2. And what more can we ask from the Senate? Ginagawa na natin yun. Pero it doesn't stop us from performing our mandate na gumawa ng batas pertaining to other pressing issues. So hindi po, sorry to disagree with you, good gentleman from Pampanga, na hindi po ako sang-ayon na ihinto na lang tayo. Ihinto ang pag-ikot ng Senado dahil sa COVID-19. Multitasking po tayo, pwede po tayo gumawa. Pero still, when you talk about priority, number 1 priority pa rin natin ang COVID-19. Kung sa akin, baka second na lang itong penalty bill na ito. Pero still, it does not preclude us from tackling these bills. Yun lang po sa akin.
Salamat at kinikilala niya na number 1 priority talaga natin ngayon itong COVID. At tama naman po yun. At ako isang-ayon sa kanyang naging punto. Nabanggit kanina ng ating butihing senador na tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang laganap o pagkalat ng droga sa ating bansa. Tama po ba yun? Kaya dapat ibalik ang death penalty?
Yes, as a matter of fact, nakita nyo, during this pandemic, billion na halaga ng shabu ang nanghuli ng ating kapulisan. So, tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang drug trafficking kahit mayroong pandemic. So kung wala sana problema sa drug trafficking, I will not author this bill, Mr. President, to tell you frankly, because ako rin ay ayaw rin ng kamatayan. Gusto ko buhay tayong lahat, walang mamamatay. Pero kung kinakailangan na magiging anti-bad life tayo in order to become a good life, then I have to do this stand. I have to make this stand, Mr. President.
So kung tama ang obserbasyon na tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang laganap at pagkalat ng droga, masasabi ba natin na ineffective ang Oplan Tokhang 4 na taon na?
Well, Mr. President, yung sinasabi mong ineffective na yan ay very subjective. Very subjective po. Kasi kung ako naman, I will not yield to your opinion na ineffective. Sabihin ko talaga, very effective. Saan ka ba nakakita ng programa ng gobyerno na nakakamit ng 1.3 million na surrenderers sa drug na mga drug users at drug users? Dito lang sa Oplan Tokhang. Saan ka nakakita ng 30,000 na mga drug offenders na aresto dahil ito sa Oplan Tokhang? Saan ka nakakita ng pagbaba ng crime rate by 49%, almost 50% dahil sa Oplan Tokhang? So, masasabi ko po na very effective ang Oplan Tokhang. Pero, kaya nga, patuloy pa rin pumapasok ang drugs sa ating bansa dahil itong business na ito ay very lucrative. Very lucrative. Masyadong mataas ang return of investment ditong drug business na ito. Kaya itong mga drug lord ay hindi talaga hinto sa kanilang negosyo hanggat hindi maibalik ang death penalty. Dahil nga, kahit nasa loob na sila ng bilibid, nakakulong na sila, patuloy pa rin ang kanilang negosyo sa droga. Dahil buhay man sila, wala mang problema. So kung yung mga drug lord na yan nasa loob ng bilibid, kung yan ay pinagbibitay na natin noon pa, matagal na sanang nawala itong ating problema sa droga. Sino magpapapasok dito ng droga? Sila. Alam po ninyo ang sitwasyon sa bilibid? Ito mga Chinese drug lord, sila ang in charge sa supply coming from abroad, coming from China. At pagpasok dito, sila rin ang in charge kung sinong pagkatiwalaan nila na mga local drug lord na nakakulong sa loob na bilibid ang mag-in charge sa distribution. So ganoon po ang kalakaran, Mr. President. Hindi ganoon kadali na sabihin natin ineffective ang Oplan Tokhang. Otherwise, wala nag-surrender na 1.3 million kung ineffective ang Oplan Tokhang. Very effective po. Kaya lang, naging ineffective yung ating total campaign dahil wala tayong batas na death penalty. Kung meron tayong death penalty, sabi nga sa akin ng drug lord dyan sa bilibid, Sir, ibalik na yung death penalty. Mawawala itong problema natin. Kung hindi man totally mawawala, bababa ang problema ng droga sa inyong bansa dahil nga kami mga incheck, kami mga Chinese na drug lord, ang pinakamalaki ng market namin sa droga ay yung China. Pero hindi kami pwede magdegosyo ng droga sa China. Patay kami kagad doon. Bitay kami. Pero sa Pilipinas, wala. Enjoying kami. Kahit nakakulong sa bilibid, tuloy ang ligaya. Tuloy ang negosyo dahil hindi nyo kami binibitay. Bitayin nyo kami. O sino pa magpapatuloy sa drug business namin? Wala na.
Are you
So,
saying, Senator De La Rosa, are you saying that the manufacturers and the drug lords, bakit ayaw nilang mag-cooperate sa Singapore, sa Malaysia, sa Indonesia, sa China? Ba't ayaw nila doon? Ba't gusto nila rin sa Pilipinas?
Merong death penalty doon sa mga bansa na tinutukoy mo, Mr. President, at napaka-stricto po yung batas nila sa death penalty doon. Patay kaagad, mabilis ang execution doon. Kaya ayaw nila magnegosyo doon. Gusto nila dito sa Pilipinas. Dahil enjoying sila, wala tayong death penalty. Pero kung sampulan natin yan, kumuha tayo dyan ng convicted na drug lord. Execute natin in public, ipakita natin sa taong bayan na ito mangyayari sa inyo pag kayo'y sige maghakot ng droga dito sa Pilipinas. Tingnan natin kung hindi matakot yung mga drug lord na yan.
But you can only do that if to his drug trafficking, high-level drug trafficking in the National Bilibid prisons. Otherwise, you cannot meet him the death penalty if because of his previous crime. Correct.
Yeah. We agree, Mr. President, that the law is never retroactive. We cannot It's can be retroactive. So hopefully, mahuli natin sila in the future after the death penalty will be reimposed.
All right, Senator Pangilinan, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Senate President. Ang sa akin, we beg to disagree na kahit na milyon ang nakulong o nag-surrender, pero laganap pa rin ng droga, ibig sabihin successful. Hindi ko nakikita yung logic na ang dami nating inaresto, libo-libo ang namatay, pero laganap pa rin ng droga. So, I beg to disagree na dapat successful dahil laganap pa rin ng droga, pero milyon ang ating nag-surrender. Hindi ko nakikita yung anyway, I beg to disagree. Nabanggit din po na dapat yung mga drug lord. Kung naalala nyo yung billion-billion na pinalusot sa Bureau of Customs noong 2017 at 2018, meron bang mga drug lord na nakasuhan doon?
Wala, Mr. President, dahil ang drug lord nandun sa China.
Kaya nga siguro...
Jurisdiction over China.
Ibig sabihin, yung mga malalaki, walang nakulong, walang nasampahan. Although, may mga testigo na hiniring pa nga natin sa Senado, si Mr. Taguba, nabanggit yung Mr. Tan, nabanggit yung iba-ibang mga pangalan, pero hindi ata walang nasampahang drug syndicate o drug lord. Hindi at nabanggit naman na nasagot naman po yun. Ano? So ang tanong ko po, so in other words, habang yung maliliit ay kinukulong o kaya ay pinagsusurrender, yung malalaki, hindi talaga nahahabol. Kaya siguro lagana pa rin ang dahil yung malalaki, wala namang pinaparusahan.
You are wrong with that, Mr. President. I completely disagree with you. Marami pong malalaking drug lord na kasuhan. Kung hindi foreigner, may records tayo dyan kung ilan yung mga Chinese drug lord na nakasuhan natin. Yung iba nga, napatay. At may mga politiko pa na malalaki, mga mayor, mga nasangkot sa droga, ay nakasuhan o kaya nahuli. So, I disagree with you na siguro ang nakikita mo lang, yung araw-araw nakikita dyan sa news, it is expected, Mr. President. Dahil kung kung alam mo lang sana ang structure ng drug syndicate, it is a pyramidal structure. Yung pyramid na yan, at the tip of the pyramid, kukunting drug lord na andon. At the base of the pyramid, ito yung mga mahihirap na mga pusher. So, if you wage a war against drugs, you cannot be selective. Hindi mo pwede sabihin na hindi natin pwedeng tirahin muna ito mahirap, unahin natin yung mayaman. Hindi po, you cannot be selected. So, ratsada yan lahat. So, it only shows na mas kukunti yung drug lord sa taas, kukunti ang nahuli. Mas marami yung drug pusher sa baba, mas maraming nahuli ito sa baba. So, yun po ang struktura ng ating drug syndicate, Mr. President. Kaya ganun po ang nangyayari. Pero when you say walang drug lord na nahuli, ay, tingnan mo yung, punta ka sa building 14, sa Bilibid. Kung ilan yung mga...
May I clarify? May I clarify? Yung ilang na hindi in reference to yung dalawang pinalusot na toneladan bu sa Bureau of Customs. Yung dalawang kaso na yon na bilyon ng na-trace, walang sinampahang kaso sa drug law doon sa dalawang kaso na yon. Nga yung Customs Commissioner na nasangkot yung dalawa, hindi nga kinasuhan na-promote pa nga, nabigyan pa ng dagdag na trabaho. But anyway, my last question, Mr. President, is kanina po na banggit ni Senator Dela Rosa na nakausap niya yung convicted drug lord at sinabi nung convicted drug lord tuloy-tuloy ang trade. Dahil daw sa face-to-face ang kanilang meeting nung mga drug lord na convicted at mga kamag-anak nito, asawa at mga anak. Nung siya ho ba Bucor head at naalaman niya ito, hindi ba niya pina-imbestiga ito at sinampahan o kaya kumuha ng impormasyon para sampahan ang drug trafficking yung mga anak at asawa na inamin na nakikipag-usap at nagpaplano ng drug trafficking? Ano ho ang ginawa po ng ating butihing senador nung nalaman niya na face-to-face na pala ang pagpaplano
Ginawa
habang
ko po,
nagtutulong sila sa buko.
ang ginawa ko po, Mr. President, ako'y naghanap ng mga asset na mga Chinese na pwedeng makinig doon sa usapan nila. Although, hindi dapat sila pakinggan dahil private matter nila yan. Pero since nagdududa tayo, minumonitor natin yung usapan nila. At mga Chinese itong kailang usapan, so medyo hirap yung ating mga gwardiya na mag-monitor. Pero naghanap tayo ng tulong na mayroong makapag-interpret sa Chinese na usapan nila. That is why nga mayroong nahuhuli at mayroong na natutumbok natin na diyan galing sa loob yung ang nagko-control, yung cartel sa loob na nagko-control sa drug transaction sa labas ng bilibid. So kaya po natin nalaman yan. At huwag po kayo magduda, Mr. President. I bet my whole life dito sa laban ko sa droga na ito, never na never akong magpabaya sa aking trabaho kung ito'y nalaman ko. At hindi ko pwede sabihin sa iyo lahat kung anong ginawa ko nung nalaman ko. Hanggang doon na lang po ako, Mr. President.
You
Well,
refuse to incriminate yourself, ha?
I refuse to incriminate myself, Mr. President.
Well, kami nagpapasalamat sa kanyang honesty. Ako naman concern ko lang doon, and a crime was being committed in the Bucor, conspiracy to commit drug trafficking, and therefore dapat talagang sampahan ng kaso yung mga yan at imbestigahan para talagang diretso ang ating effort dito sa illegal na droga. I have no further questions, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the good sponsor sa kanyang pagsasagot sa ating mga katanungan. Maraming salamat kay Senator Dela Rosa at salamat din Majority Leader. Thank you, Mr. Senator.
Majority Leader.